Welcome to Tell Me More Stories Told as Podcasts. Get ready for, well, quite an adventure today. We're diving headfirst into the story of a company that didn't just tweak how we watch movies.
Oh, they absolutely flipped the script, didn't they?
Totally. Forget those, dusty old video stores.
Yeah.
Today, we're charting the incredible, sometimes bumpy journey of Netflix.
Exactly. And think of this as your sort of personal backstage pass. We're using the sources you shared to uncover the key moments, the big decisions, the surprising turns that made Netflix what it is.
Our mission really is to get the inside scoop on this whole phenomenon.
Yeah, we'll trace it right from the start, those red envelopes in the mail.
Can you even imagine waiting for a DVD?
It feels like another era. But we'll follow that right up to now, a global streaming giant. Hundreds of millions watching, making their own blockbuster movies and shows.
And like you said, there are some twists. You absolutely have to hear about the time Blockbuster could have bought Netflix.
Oh, the legendary story. For just $50 million.
$50 million. And Blockbuster, well.
They basically laughed, didn't they? Reportedly thought the whole internet thing was maybe a bit overhyped back then.
Wow. Talk about a missed opportunity. Okay, let's rewind back to the beginning. 1997.
Right, 1997. Netflix launches, but it's purely DVD by mail. But even then, they were innovating. They had this thing called the dynamic queue.
Ah, yes. Explain that a bit.
Well, instead of just picking one movie, you'd make a whole list, rank them in order of preference.
Okay.
And their system would automatically mail you the next available one from your list as soon as you returned the previous one. Pretty smart logistics for the time.
Definitely. It took the hassle out of choosing every single time. You just kept the list updated.
Exactly. And then, by 2000, they layer on Cinematch.
Their first recommendation system. Trying to guess what you'd like.
Yeah, even before streaming, they were thinking about personalization, using data to figure out tastes.
Which brings us back to that Blockbuster meeting in September 2000.
Right in the middle of the dot-com bubble craziness. Netflix goes to Blockbuster, the undisputed king, and says, hey, buy us for $50 million.
It shows how uncertain things were. Even for innovators like Netflix, they needed stability, maybe.
Possibly, or saw a strategic fit. But Blockbuster just couldn't see the future, apparently. Stuck in their barn-mortar world.
$1 billion laugh looking back. But the early 2000s weren't exactly smooth sailing for Netflix either, were they?
Not at all. The dot-com crash really hurt confidence and funding across the board.
Right.
And then the economic impact of 9/11,
Yeah.
it forced them into some tough spots. Layoffs, delaying their IPO plans.
It shows that even revolutionary ideas face real-world pressures. You got to navigate the storms.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But they kept pushing. By 2006, they actually sued Blockbuster.
Oh. Over what?
Patent infringement. Blockbuster had launched its own online DVD rental service, and Netflix claimed they were copying key features.
Like the dynamic queue.
Exactly. The queue, the subscription model itself. Netflix was basically defending its core innovations.
Protecting their secret sauce. Did it go anywhere?
They settled it in 2007. Terms weren't disclosed, but it sent a message.
And also in 2006, something else pretty cool happened, right? The Netflix Prize.
Yes, $1 million. A challenge to the world, basically.
To do what?
To improve their recommendation algorithm, Cinematch, by at least 10%. A huge public data science competition.
$1 million just to make their movie suggestions better. That shows how much they valued that personalization.
Totally. And it worked. A team called Belcore's Pragmatic Chaos, great name, eventually won it in 2009. It really pushed the field forward.
And here's a fun fact for you listening. By February 2007, Netflix had shipped its 1 billionth DVD. 1 billion red envelopes.
Incredible scale, even before streaming really took off. They even dabbled in distributing, maybe even producing, some indie films through a division called Red Envelope Entertainment.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, but they closed that down in 2008. Decided to focus purely on the core rental and, crucially, the future business.
Which was always the plan, wasn't it? Streaming.
Always. The DVDs were, in a way, just building the brand, the customer base, the data, getting ready for the main event.
And that started in January 2007. Watch now.
The dawn of Netflix streaming. But let's manage expectations here.
How so?
It launched with only about 1,000 titles. Maybe. Compare that to the 70,000 DVDs they had available.
Wow. Okay. Tiny selection.
And you initially needed Internet Explorer to even watch it.
No way. Seriously.
Seriously. It was, let's say, a very modest start.
But a start nonetheless. They had to begin somewhere. And they started making deals with studios for streaming content, right? That was key.
Absolutely crucial. You can have the tech, but without the movies and shows, what's the point? But those early deals,
Yeah.
they weren't always straightforward.
How do you mean?
Well, the studios were still very protective of their DVD sales, understandably. So by 2010, Netflix had to agree to things like a 28-day delay on new releases from Warner Bros., Universal, Fox.
Ah, so you couldn't stream the biggest new movies instantly. You still had to wait or buy the DVD?
Exactly. It was this kind of balancing act, trying to push streaming forward without completely alienating the studios they relied on.
A tricky position. But they kept expanding. The first international move?
Canada. September 2010, testing the waters outside the U.S.
Okay.
And then a really big shift in November 2010. They offered a standalone streaming-only plan.
Finally unbundling it from the DVDs.
Yep. You can choose just streaming or just DVDs or both. But it signaled clearly where their focus was really heading.
And people responded.
Massively. By May 2011, just think about the speed of Netflix was reportedly the largest single source of internet streaming traffic in North America.
The largest source. More than anything else.
Yep. One company dominating downstream internet traffic, particularly in the evenings. It was staggering.
But then came that stumble, July 2011.
Ah, yes. The Quickster incident.
Tell us about Clickster. Sounds like a failed superhero.
Well, they announced they were fully separating the DVD and streaming businesses, different pricing, different websites, and the DVD service would be rebranded as Quickster.
Okay, why?
The logic was probably to let streaming be its own thing, maybe raise its price independently, but the execution,
It was not good.
not good at all.
Okay.
Customers hated it, the confusion, the price hike for keeping both services, the silly name. The backlash was immediate and fierce.
People felt like they were being nickeled and dimed or just unnecessarily inconvenienced.
Exactly. And credit to them, they listened. It was a rare public misstep, but they reversed the Quickster decision just a few months later, in October 2011.
Kept the DVD service under the Netflix name. Lesson learned, I guess.
A very public lesson. But they didn't let it slow down the expansion. Latin America launched in September 2011.
Right.
Then the UK and Ireland in January 2012. The global march continued.
And they needed more content to fuel that growth. More deals.
Big time. Deals with the Weinstein Company, with Epics for movies,
Yeah.
and then the really big one, Disney. Announced late 2012.
What did the Disney deal entail?
It gave Netflix exclusive U.S. pay TV rights for first-run Disney movies, starting in 2016. Think Marvel, Pixar, Disney Animation, coming to Netflix first after theaters and home video.
That's huge. A major coup. That must have cost a fortune.
Presumably. But it cemented Netflix as a must-have service for families and movie fans. It was a real power play against traditional channels like HBO or Showtime.
They were really muscling their way into the big leagues, and they even got political.
In a way, 2012, they formed PhilXPAC, a political action committee, mostly focused on things like net neutrality, which was, and still is, crucial for their business model.
Makes sense. Protecting the pipes that deliver their product. Okay, so they've got the platform, they're global, they have content deals. What's the next evolution?
Original content. This is where things get really transformative.
Moving from just licensing other people's stuff to making their own.
Exactly. And they weren't just guessing what to make. They were using all that incredible viewer data from Watch Now.
How so? What were they looking at?
Everything. What shows did people binge watch in a weekend? Where did they pause? What scenes did they rewatch? What actors or directors kept people engaged? They had mountains of data on viewing habits.
Using that data to greenlight new shows.
Smart.
Very smart. And their first big bet, based partly on this kind of analysis, was House of Cards.
February 2013. Kevin Spacey, David Fincher directing. That felt different.
It was different. First, it was a direct-to-series order. No pilot episode needed. They committed upfront.
Okay.
And second, the release strategy. All 13 episodes dropped at once.
The birth of the modern binge watch.
Pretty much. It catered directly to how people were already starting to consume streaming content. It was revolutionary and incredibly successful.
And that opened the floodgates, right?
Absolutely. Orange is the New Black followed soon after, another massive critical and popular hit. They brought back Arrested Development for a new season.
Which was huge for fans.
Yeah. It showed they weren't afraid to spend big and take creative risks based on what their audience, or at least segments of it, clearly wanted. And they diversified the originals, too. Kids' shows.
Yep, big deal with DreamWorks Animation for original children's series.
And superheroes. The Marvel deal.
Right. Daredevil, Jessica Jones, Luke Cage, Iron Fist.
Yeah.
Darker, grittier takes in the movies, all leading up to the crossover event. The Defenders, they were building their own interconnected universe.
It felt like they were building a whole new kind of TV network, but online and on demand.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
And they kept refining the platform itself, reintroducing user profiles finally, so different family members could have their own lists and recommendations.
Oh, yeah. That was essential. Saved a lot of arguments, probably.
Huh, probably. Added Facebook integration for sharing, once the legal hurdles were cleared, always tweaking the experience.
And the global march just kept going. Where next after the UK and Latin America?
More of Europe in 2014, France, Germany, others. Then Australia, New Zealand, Japan in 2015, picking up major markets.
But then 2016, that seemed like a quantum leap.
It really was. January 2016, at the Consumer Electronics Show, Reed Hastings announced a massive simultaneous expansion.
How massive?
Over 130 new countries, all at once. Suddenly, Netflix was available almost everywhere in the world, with just a few exceptions like China, Syria, North Korea.
Wow, just flipped a switch and went global. That takes infrastructure.
And confidence.
Oh.
They also launched helpful tools, like Fast.com in May 2016, a simple way for anyone to check their internet speed.
Useful for figuring out if your buffering is Netflix's fault or your internet's.
Exactly. And a huge win for users later that year, November 2016, offline playback.
Finally, download shows to your phone or tablet. Perfect for commutes, flights.
A game changer for usability. By the end of 2016, their output of original content actually surpassed any single U.S. network or cable channel.
More originals than HBO or NBC or anyone.
That's what reports suggested. They had become a content production powerhouse. And they started commissioning more internationally, too, like their first Colombian original announced in 2017.
Real global production, not just distribution.
Yeah, aiming for that goal of 50% original content on the platform by 2019. Huge investment. And of course, they gave us a little gift.
The skip intro button, bless them for that.
A small feature, but oh so satisfying for binge watchers.
Okay, before we dive into the really recent stuff like gaming and live events, just a quick reminder for everyone listening. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the Netflix story,
And you want more stories like this, exploring the companies and phenomena that shape our world.
then please do hit that subscribe button on Tell Me More. That way, you won't miss our next adventure.
Okay, so from 2017 onwards, Netflix is global. It's a content machine. What's next? Doubling down.
Pretty much. Locking in top talent with huge overall deals. Think Sean Levy, the guy behind Stranger Things. Genji Kohan of Orange is the New Black.
Keeping those successful creators in-house.
Exactly. And that huge deal with Barack and Michelle Obama's company, Higher Ground Productions, bringing a different kind of prestige programming.
They also started acquiring movies differently, right? Getting films like The Cloverfield Paradox for exclusive streaming debuts, sometimes bypassing theaters entirely.
Yeah, shaking up the traditional movie release windows. And partnering sometimes too, like integrating Netflix into Sky's pay TV service in the UK. Not always going it alone.
Smart strategy in complex markets. And that international push just intensified, pouring money into non-English language productions, finding hits from Spain, Korea, Germany.
Money Heist, Squid Game, shows that became global phenomena.
Exactly. Proving great stories can come from anywhere. But then, the really unexpected pivot? Gaming.
Yeah, that felt like it came out of left field for many people. When did that start seriously?
They hired a former Electronic Arts, EA, executive in mid-2021 to lead the charge. By late 2021, the first mobile games appeared in the Netflix app.
Included with your subscription, right? No extra cost.
Correct. Part of the value proposition. And they weren't just licensing games. They started buying studios.
Like who?
Night School Studio, known for Oxenfree. Next Games in Finland. Boss Fight Entertainment. Building internal development capability.
A serious investment. And they bought the Roald Dahl Story Company, too. That's huge.
Yeah, in 2021, access to that entire universe of characters and stories, Willy Wonka, Matilda, the BFG for potential films, series, and games, a massive IP acquisition.
Wow. They're thinking really broad now, beyond just streaming video.
Definitely. And trying new ways to engage the audience.
Yeah.
The Netflix book club with Starbucks, that big 2D global fan event, creating a brand ecosystem.
2D named after their iconic sound logo.
That's the one. And investing heavily in physical production spaces, too. Studios in the UK, Canada, all over.
Wow.
Becoming a true global producer.
And then live events. That seems like another big leap.
It is. The Netflix is a Joke comedy festival, for instance. Big live stand-up events, often filmed for specials later.
And sports. I heard something about sports.
This is maybe the newest frontier. They streamed that Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson boxing match in late 2024, reportedly drew a huge audience.
Boxing on Netflix.
Okay. And they even secured rights to stream live NFL games on Christmas Day starting in 2024. That's stepping onto turf, usually reserved for major broadcasters.
Whoa. NFL games, that is a whole new ballgame. So they're really pushing the definition of what Netflix is.
Absolutely. And even planning physical entertainment venues called Netflix House. Retail, dining, experiences based on their shows, blurring digital and physical.
It's incredible. Meanwhile, the thing that started it all,
The DVDs. Yeah, the final curtain came down in September 2023.
end of an era. How many did they ship in total?
Over 5 billion DVDs mailed out in those red envelopes over the years. Just mind-boggling.
Wow. And there were leadership changes too. Reed Hastings isn't CEO anymore.
Right. In January 2023, Greg Peters and Ted Sarandos became co-CEOs. Reed Hastings moved to executive chairman, a transition at the top.
And subscriber numbers just keep climbing.
By early 2025, they crossed 300 million subscribers worldwide. Just immense scale.
And they're still tweaking the core product. A new homepage design announced recently.
Yeah, May 2025. First major redesign since 2013. Apparently aimed at better showcasing everything. The movies, the series, the games, the live stuff. Making it easier to discover the vast amount of content.
So, wrapping this incredible journey up, what's the big takeaway?
I mean, from mailing DVDs to maybe hosting live football games and building theme park-like venues,
Yeah.
it's just relentless adaptation, isn't it? A masterclass in disrupting yourself before someone else does.
And that $50 million offer Blockbuster laughed at? It just seems surreal now, knowing what Netflix became.
Completely surreal. It really highlights how hard it is to predict the future, even when it's staring you in the face.
So here's the really interesting part now. Netflix clearly isn't just a streaming service anymore. It's aiming to be this all-encompassing entertainment company.
Original movies, global TV, games, live sports, maybe even physical locations.
So the big question for you, listening right now, is how will you engage with this new, multifaceted Netflix? Are you excited about the games, the live events, or are you just sticking to the movies and series?
It's fascinating to think about how our relationship with the platform might change in the coming years. What part of this expanded empire will matter most to you?
And maybe a final thought to leave you with. The next time you fire up Netflix and press play, just take a second to remember this wild ride. The mailed DVDs, the Blockbuster snub, the Quickster fumble, the pivot to originals, the leap into gaming. It's an amazing story of risk, innovation, and, well, constantly changing the channel.
It really is. The story's still being written.
Thanks so much for taking this deep dive with us today on Tell Me More Stories Told as podcast. We'll catch you on the next one.